Hi, my name is Zane Starr, and I wanted to talk to you today about ETC Labs technology in the wild, and sort of give you a brief overview of what we're doing and kind of why, and build that sort of information and knowledge of what we're doing. So who am I? My name is, once again, Zane Starr, and I've primarily spent most of my career building infrastructure and services for things from wireless insert network to big data to just microservices kind of in many different contexts. I work for the ETC Labs core tooling team, and prior to working for ETC Labs, I was working at Consensus on decentralized science fiction. All right, so I wanted to open this talk off with a question. How many of you in the audience have used cryptocurrency for anything? I suspect not many. And then let's say that you have used cryptocurrency. How many have used it for something other than finance or financial instruments or investments? Probably not many. And so we have to look at really why. And the reason why is that blockchain technology is just too opaque. Developers want to connect with the technology, but they can't quite see necessarily all the pieces of how to do that. Users want to connect with technology, and they can't quite see it. And the technology wants to be connected to by the users, and they want to be connected to by the developers. But communicating how to do that is also a bit of a fuzzy process. You can kind of see through it, but you can't quite like make out all of the edges clearly enough to make it a smooth process. And then finally, developers want to connect to users, and users want to connect to developer software. And so one kind of weird illustration of this is to think about this. So let's say you were a user of a Dogecoin, you have a Dogecoin wallet, and you kind of understand how to connect to Dogecoin. And then there's an Ethereum Classic dApp. So your question then becomes like, well, how do I connect to this Ethereum Classic dApp when I'm already connected to this other ecosystem? And so the developer would love to like support the Dogecoin wallet user, but doesn't really have the same level of clarity on like how to do that. And so really there's this opaque wall that is like sort of blocking the access between all of these parties communicating. And so really the question is like at this point in blockchain development, how do we remove that opacity? So another thing to consider is that the gateway application, I think, for blockchain does not really exist yet. So there's DeFi and it's growing, but really there hasn't been that app that really causes you to suffer to gain access to the thing. So like if you think about the way like the internet and then you think about PayPal and eBay, these were things that has like real tangible physical like impact on your life. And then if you think about like the way mobile phones work, I remember in college, I even had a pay-as-you-go mobile phone just because access to cellular technology was such an important thing even for me to have in college at the time. This like predates family plans. So it's kind of like this urge to get on a network and participate in this activity that you couldn't do before. And so right now we're kind of at the cusp, but it's not quite there. And then if you think about like when you're building things, and as like ETC Labs being an investor and accelerator as well as a core developer, you have to think about what you want to see happen. And so it's all about sort of the future and like how we want people to build things for the space. So what we really want and what we're really dreaming of is to build the ecosystem that allows people to build the blockchain sort of we dream about. So one that's open, pro-privacy, decentralized, transparent, fast, accessible to all kinds of people and all like sort of groups like headed towards a particular ideal, which is this blockchain ideal. All right, so what are we building to solve these things, and what are some of the problems that we've identified? So what we've identified are like the blockchain programming languages are too unfamiliar. So what we've built to kind of solve this is the EVM LLVM, which is to allow people to write code for a blockchain. And there's smart code, contract code, or code for the EVM, and a familiar language. So just to like sort of set the problem space for you, like if you look at the letters on the left, you see that, oh, well, here's this language that I don't quite know. It kind of has the form factor, and you can kind of figure out maybe there's words, maybe these are sentences, and it looks like a similar shape to something that you would have seen before, but you don't quite know. And then the thing that you're going to do is take this and then deploy this on a bunch of devices, different machines, in many different contexts to control a lot of different things. And then let's take this language on the left and compare it to the language on the bottom. So if you're even not a programmer, you can see and you can read this. It has a certain form and like, structure that is already, if you're familiar with English, familiar. So this makes things way easier to sort of access this technology and understand what's going on. And if you're a programmer, then even better, because this is C, and this is a language that you already understand like the edges of and like what it should be doing, and you can start to focus on things that are more impactful, like the actual logic. All right, so the other thing that we're kind of working on and just like understanding is like this kind of philosophy of programming what you can understand. So a lot of the documentation and like sort of the blockchain ecospace is hard to understand, hard to grasp, and documentation doesn't necessarily line up with the implementation. And so it's this disconnect from the developer that's moving fast, but also wants to provide access for people to actually use their service. And documentation is a big part of that. And outside of that, having strong types, which is another form of documentation, is also important. So the tool that we have that ETC Labs is working on is expanding the reach and scope of OpenRPC, which is a JSONRPC document description language. So with these two things, you're able to kind of get this amazing tooling, which allows you, on the one hand, to have documentation built in, and to allow you to generate type-safe code in clients to access that. So just to recap and to fill in a few things. So JSONRPC is a protocol that a lot of blockchain systems use, from Bitcoin to Ethereum Classic to Ethereum to Dash to Doge to Litecoin. The list goes on and on and on of many projects that use this as a communication protocol. So what we've done is we've added types and type safety around this, and we've put it in a nice package to have this document description language, which allows us to do code automation and code generation, which is really awesome. And you should check out the talk later today with Shane and Zach and Isaac. So here's an example of like what OpenRPC can do. So here's an OpenRPC service at port 1999. And to the left is kind of our graphical, which is just inspector. And what it allows you to do, because it's using OpenRPC, this service, it gives this nice type ahead quality where you can error check and you can have a nice tool like the inspector to make requests to that service and get back a typed response. And so this is useful, and this is just one of the many tools for this, because there's also code generation, which is beyond awesome. When we're talking about opacity, I was talking about like being able to access things. And so one of those core things is like, how do we provide better access to the protocol? So below is like Alibaba with 40 thieves in open sesame. And so that is kind of the goal and the reach and the aim of some of the tooling that we're building. So what are we building? So when I talk about access, what am I talking about? I'm talking about access to the full node, access to the Ethereum protocol, and access to public key infrastructure. So access to a full node, what is this? What is Jade? So Jade is a project that acts as a proxy and a daemon for JSON-RPC-based services. So what that means is if you were to spin up a node, what Jade does is it manages that process and provides a discoverable URL to access that node. So what this does is it provides the tooling to allow developers to like, have knowledge as to what a user is running and like how to connect to that and how to enable the user to run their own services as well. And so that's just kind of like one way that we're providing access to a full node. And so another thing that we've done is we've got our own sort of client called CoreGEF. And so what CoreGEF does from a philosophical perspective that's different than with Geth is that it tries to say the thing that we're building a client around is the Ethereum protocol. And so like if your network is running on the Ethereum protocol, then we kind of want to be able to support that. And so how do we build a client that tries to decouple its actual implementation from the Ethereum spec itself? And so it's a super exciting project with a lot of developers that are excitedly working on it. And then finally, how do we provide access to the fundamental elements of blockchain, which I think is public and private key sort of encryption? And how do we like provide access to this infrastructure? So what we have at the bottom is Signatory. And so Signatory is an offline first signer that allows users and people and developers to have access to key signing technology to be able to sign transactions, messages, recover keys, etc. And so it just focuses on the key management. It doesn't focus on sending transactions or doing any of the heavy wallet stuff, but it does the fundamental thing so you can use it in any kind of context. So if you want to do this for like channels or for micropayments and that kind of thing, then Signatory can help you along that journey because it does not do the additional heavy lifting for you. It just tries to provide the interface and a variety of contexts. So this is a little bit what Jade looks like. So on the left is the Jade UX. So it allows the user to just kind of point and click and get access to starting a full node client. And then it manages that and puts that on a discoverable URL. And then to the right is essentially how a developer could do the exact same thing, but from code. So you can imagine once we have the permission system that this code can then prompt the user to install or run a service on its behalf. And this would then sort of bridge that gap between sort of the mobile app convenience and convenient services for dApp developers to deploy and have like heavier weight applications. So here's Signatory on the left, just to give you an idea of the code interface. And then on the right is our experimental sneak peek at Signatory's version of a UX. And so basically what it does is allow you to store or access your public or private keys within the context that you're writing. And then finally here we have CoreGEF. And so I just want to talk about the community of CoreGEF because community is what generally makes things. And so we have a getter with lots of active participants. And I just wanted to invite people to come and join the discussion and start thinking broader about just the Ethereum protocol, not the specific implementations. So again, we got Jade, CoreGEF, Signatory. You should look them all up on GitHub. They're on the ETC Labs core GitHub, which is just a great resource for a lot of interesting projects and research that we're doing. And then sort of to wrap this up, what about access to information and what's going on in chain? We have this awesome tool called expedition.dev. And so it's a block explorer that's database free that works against any sort of blockchain that is EVM based. And it doesn't mean that you have to install anything outside of just npm install and then point it at your RPC endpoint for the service. And as long as it implements the JSONRPC interface for Ethereum, you're golden. And this is kind of the cool like sort of graphics that it does. This doesn't do it justice because there's a lot more details and things that you can see. But here's some of the cool features, which gives you this nice overview, the ability to look across multiple chains, and then how the miners are doing and like how full the blocks are with a nice visualization, which is amazing because all of this works without a separate database, so no schema migrations, etc. And finally, to not leave universities out because they're super important. Universities, we think, are the hubs of innovation. So ETC Labs is committed to helping universities access the blockchain and to be there as a resource and a partner in university development. So one of those initiatives that we're working on and with is the Blockchain Education Alliance with Mousebelt, who've been leaders in this area. And so we've joined them and other companies to help sort of foster a discussion of blockchain in universities and figure out where we can jump in. And doing conferences like this is just one of those aspects that the Blockchain Education Alliance is doing, and we're looking to be a strong participant in. And so finally, we have our more specific university project that we've been working on. So we've been working on a capstone project with Lehigh University. It's a 2-semester long project with sophomores and juniors and weekly student-driven discussions. So students decide what we talk about, and we just pair with them to help them build the idea that they have in their head. And then I thought that like really everything should like sort of center around, which is like figuring out connectivity. And so this quote from Muhammad Ali is basically saying, I wish everyone would love me, would love everybody else like they love me. In which case, me being a blockchain developer and having been in space for a little while now, like all the tools feel familiar and all the like innovations are like good, but we have to look broader to reach new developers and to figure out how we can innovate and provide platforms for people to build tools. So we need to love everybody else as much as we do the people that are already in the space. Our tooling is kind of focused on doing that and like making things accessible and being able to slide the opaque glass walls out of the way or down or up or like knock them over. Just so that way we can provide access that's easy and understandable for people. And so just to recap, cool programming languages, awesome tools to understand what's going on. We're working with universities to provide more points of contact and interaction. And we want to just create tools to help people access the blockchain in any context. So as a recap, here's some more additional information. You should check out Alan Lee's talk, Shane Jonas's talk, Zachary Belford, and Isaac Artis. They're talking more in depth about the technologies I presented today, and they have awesome talks lined up. So thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Bye.